You're standing in a protest, signs raised high, voices chanting in unison for freedom or something like that. But then a strange figure steps into the crowd. He looks around and asks, "What are you all fighting for? Freedom, equality, revolution? It sounds like you've just traded one master for another." This figure is Max Stirner, and his question shakes the foundation of everything we think we know about liberation. In today's video, we're diving into the world of post-anarchism and exploring the provocative idea that Stirner, a thinker so fiercely individualistic he rejected labels altogether, might just be its key philosophical influence. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, what is post-anarchism? Here's how we're breaking it down. We'll start with an overview of post-anarchism, drawing on anarchist scholars to explain how it rethinks power, identity, and resistance. Then we'll tackle the big question: is Stirner even an anarchist? Or does his radical egoism place him outside the realm of anarchist thought entirely? Finally, we'll explore how Stirner's idea, when viewed through the lens of psychoanalysis and post-structuralism, can help post-anarchism address the complex realities of capitalism and desire in the modern world. By the end of this video, you'll see why Stirner's critique of political identity and his rejection of all spooks make him an unlikely, but also essential ally in the post-anarchist struggle, and we'll uncover how his work can help us resist not just domination, but the subtle ways our desires are captured and commodified in today's world. Let's begin by unpacking what post-anarchism actually means and how it builds on and challenges classical anarchism. Post-anarchism is not just anarchism with a new coat of paint. It's a reimagining of anarchism itself. Rooted in post-structuralist philosophy, it moves beyond the classical anarchist focus on tangible oppressors like the state or capitalism. Instead, it targets the invisible systems of power embedded in language, identity, and desire. In other words, post-anarchism doesn't replace anarchism. It pushes it to evolve, to confront not just what oppresses us, but how oppression operates at a deeper, often unconscious level. Traditional anarchism sees authority in binary terms, so we have the oppressor, like the state, capitalism, and hierarchies, and the oppressed, like workers, the marginalized, and the colonized. This is a very materialistic perspective. It seeks liberation through the deconstruction of external systems of domination. Figures like Bakunin and Kropotkin envisioned a stateless cooperative society where the material conditions of exploitation would be eradicated. But post-anarchists ask, what if the problem isn't just external structures? What if oppression resides within us, in the ideals we hold, the identities we cling to, and the narratives we internalize? Post-anarchism draws heavily from post-structuralist thinkers like Foucault, Derrida, and Deleuze. So let's talk about them. Michel Foucault shifted the focus from state power to what he called disciplinary power, or how institutions shape our behavior and how power is reproduced in everyday life. Jacques Derrida introduced the idea of deconstruction, which questions binary oppositions like freedom versus authority and reveals their mutual dependency. Deleuze and Guattari expanded on how capitalism and authority encode desire itself, making rebellion part of the system it resists. Post-anarchism takes these ideas and applies them to anarchist theory that rejects the fixed categories like worker, citizen, revolutionary, and so forth of classical anarchism in favor of a dynamic critique of power, identity, and ideology. But what are the key ideas of post-anarchist thought? Well, number one, power is everywhere. So power is not just centralized in the state or corporations. As Foucault argues, power is dispersed, operating in institutions, social norms, and even relationships. The second one is that identity is a trap. Post-anarchism critiques how collective identities like the worker or the revolutionary can actually become oppressive. The third one is that language and desire matter. Post-structuralism introduces the idea that power shapes not only what we do, but also what we desire. Post-anarchists critique how ideals of freedom or revolution can themselves become spooks or abstract ideals that control us instead of liberating us. The fourth one is that post-anarchism is a method, not a doctrine. Unlike classical anarchism, post-anarchism is not a rigid program. It's a method of questioning authority and power wherever they appear, especially within ourselves. It seeks to dismantle not just systems, but also the assumptions we rely on to oppose those systems. And this brings us to Stirner. Although he predated post-anarchism by over a century, his critique of spooks laid the groundwork for this evolution. Stirner asks, what if even the fight for freedom is haunted by invisible masters? So let's figure out, is Stirner an anarchist? Max Stirner is often categorized as an anarchist, but do you think he would agree with that label? In The Ego in Its Own, he rejects any and all fixed identities, including the notion of being part of a collective movement. This raises an intriguing question. Can someone who refuses to submit to any ideological framework be considered an anarchist at all? To understand this tension, we need to look at what classical anarchism represents. Anarchists fought against external structures of domination, such as the state, capitalism, and organized religion. They envisioned a world based on mutual aid and horizontal organization. But Stirner's critique cuts much deeper. He's not just concerned with external domination, but with the internalized ideals that people unconsciously follow, what he calls spooks. For Stirner, even anarchist ideals like freedom, equality, or revolution can become spooks, or abstract principles that enslave the ego by demanding obedience and sacrifice. In this sense, Stirner's rejection of all higher causes places him outside the framework of classical anarchism. But despite his rejection of labels, Stirner does share certain affinities with anarchism. First, he is what you would call anti-authority. Stirner is deeply critical of all forms of authority, both external and internal, and he mocks the state, religion, and morality as tools of oppression, which echoes the anarchist critique of hierarchy. The second one is individual sovereignty. Stirner's focus on the ego aligns with anarchism's emphasis on personal autonomy, and his radical individualism complements the anarchist vision of a society free from coercion. Stirner diverges in significant ways as well. Classical anarchists envision a collective, cooperative future. Stirner, in contrast, rejects any collective project that demands subordination of the individual. Also, where anarchists champion justice or equality, Stirner dismisses these ideals as spooks or even dangerous causes that only shift power from one authority to another. This has led some anarchist scholars like Saul Newman to argue that Stirner is better understood as a precursor to post-anarchism rather than as a classical anarchist. He states, for example, the focus should not be on the unfolding of some sort of human essence or immanent rationality, but rather on processes of subjectivization. Here, we should pay particular attention to Max Stirner's vital distinction between revolution and insurrection, in which the latter involves a kind of self-transformation. Stirner's radical individualism is fundamentally at odds with any collective identity, even one as anti-authoritarian as anarchism. To call him an anarchist would be to misunderstand his project. In his text, he states the following: revolution and insurrection must not be looked upon as synonymous. The former consists in an overturning of conditions, of the established condition or status, the state or society, and is accordingly a political or social act. The latter has indeed for its unavoidable consequence a transformation of circumstances, yet does not start from it, but from men's discontent with themselves. Is not an armed rising, but a rising of individuals, a getting up without regard to the arrangements that spring from it. The revolution aimed at new arrangements. Insurrection leads us no longer to let ourselves be arranged, but to arrange ourselves, and sets no glittering hopes on institutions. It is not a fight against the established, since if it prospers, the established collapses on itself. It is only a working forth of me out of the established. So what we have to do is differentiate between an anarchism which is about collective political identity and goals, and an anarchism which is about individual desire. And then from there to ask in what way Stirner aligns with individualist anarchism. Since I've already done this in detail in a previous video, I'm not doing it here again. So please feel free to watch my video on egoism versus individualism to learn more about the nuances. I will link it in the description. But let's just say for Stirner, the ego, free from the spooks of ideology, is all that matters. So his philosophy is more about avoiding definitions at all costs. He doesn't seek to build a better world. He seeks to reclaim ownership of his life, liberated from every external demand, whether from the state or the revolution. I would say, rather than viewing Stirner as an anarchist, it's more accurate to see him as a key influence on post-anarchism. His critique of spooks provides post-anarchism capitalism with a powerful tool for analyzing not just external domination, but also the internalized ideals that perpetuate oppression. By rejecting all political identities, Stirner opens the door to a form of anarchism that is fluid, dynamic, and deeply personal. But how can this egoist perspective contribute to post-anarchist theory's broader aims, especially in resisting the insidious forces of capitalism? And that's where we turn next. If classical anarchism sought to dismantle the state and capitalism, and Stirner critiqued the invisible spooks that inhabit our minds, what does post-anarchism seek to achieve? It is not simply a reworking of anarchism's goals, but a radical reframing of what resistance and liberation mean. Post-anarchism builds on Stirner's egoism and the insights of post-structuralism to navigate a world where power doesn't just oppress, it seduces and infiltrates our desires. Classical anarchism thrives on opposition, the oppressed versus the oppressors, hierarchy versus equality. Post-anarchism moves away from this binary. It doesn't just oppose the state or capitalism, it interrogates the structures of power that shape identity, desire, and even our resistance. This means that the enemy isn't just the system out there, it's also the spooks within, those unquestioned beliefs and desires that keep us tied to oppressive structure. Post-anarchism draws heavily on Stirner's critique of political identity. He rejected all forms of fixed identity, worker revolutionary anarchists, as spooks that demand loyalty and sacrifice. For Stirner, these identities are tools of domination, even when they appear liberatory. Post-anarchism applies this critique to modern forms of identity politics. While identities can be empowering, they can also become prisons, enforcing conformity and limiting individual agency. The post-anarchist project, inspired by Stirner, is to liberate individuals from these constraints. To go deeper, I would like to incorporate Jacques Lacan's psychoanalysis, especially his theory of desire, to show why Stirner's perspective is important. Desire, according to Lacan, isn't something we own. It's shaped by the symbolic order or the societal structures that pretty much tell us what to want. Here's where Stirner becomes essential. By dismantling spooks, Stirner provides a method for questioning not only our beliefs but also our desires. Post-anarchism uses this insight to avoid the trap of reproducing oppressive structures in the name of liberation. Consider the desire for revolution. Lacanian theory would ask, what drives this desire? Is it a genuine pursuit of freedom, or is it shaped by the symbolic order, or a need to conform to the ideal of the revolutionary? Stirner's critique helps post-anarchism disentangle these hidden motives and ensures that liberation doesn't become another spook. While Stirner helps post-anarchism critique spooks, Deleuze and Guattari offer tools for resisting capitalism as well. Capitalism doesn't just exploit labor, it colonizes desire, and it channels creativity and rebellion into marketable forms. Deleuze and Guattari's concept of deterritorialization resonates with Stirner's egoism. It emphasizes breaking free from fixed systems and identities and creates new flows of thought and action. But they warn that capitalism is a master of re-territorialization, capturing these flows and turning them into products. Post-anarchism, if we let Stirner and Deleuze guide us through it, seeks to resist this capture by fostering a nomadic approach to identity and power. Instead of replacing one system with another, it encourages perpetual movement, fluidity, and critique. The aims of post-anarchism are not about building utopias or creating new ideologies. Instead, they are about dismantling systems, both external and internal, that limit our ability to live as unique individuals. Post-anarchism doesn't promise a perfect world. It promises a world where individuals are free to reject any ideal, even those claiming to offer liberation. By using Stirner and Lacan, post-anarchism helps us recognize how our desires are shaped by power and how we can reclaim them as our own. And inspired by Deleuze and Guattari, post-anarchism teaches us to resist capitalism's ability to co-opt rebellion, staying one step ahead of its attempts to define and commodify us. Stirner's egoism is the spark that ignites post-anarchism. in my opinion. His relentless critique of spooks provides a foundation for questioning not only authority, but also identity and desire. He gives us a more calming sense to navigate post-structuralist thought. By combining his insights with post-structuralist tools like Lacanian psychoanalysis and Deleuzian theory, post-anarchism becomes a powerful method for resisting domination in all its forms. Stirner's true contribution to post-anarchism isn't his anti-authoritarianism. It's his refusal to be captured by any system, even one that claims to liberate him. And in this sense, post-anarchism doesn't just ask how we resist power. It asks how we resist being turned into tools of power ourselves. So, Max Stirner isn't an anarchist in a traditional sense. He'd probably scoff at the label altogether, but that's precisely why his ideas are so crucial to post-anarchism and really shouldn't be ignored. I think Max Stirner is probably the most important influence on post-anarchism so that it doesn't become the bullshit that post-structuralist thought is being turned into. So, scoff away as much as possible. That's the message. His relentless critique of spooks, his rejection of fixed ideals, and his focus on the ever-shifting nature of ownness align perfectly with post-anarchism's aims to dismantle power at its deepest, most insidious levels, if that is really truly the thing that we're doing. Post-anarchism isn't about replacing one system of domination with another or defining a utopia. It's about continuously questioning, deconstructing, and resisting both the external systems of authority and the internalized structures that shape our identity. Stirner's egoism is like a security system. So when filtered through Lacanian psychoanalysis and Deleuzian philosophy, I think Stirner can offer the tools to navigate the complexities in ways that classical anarchism and post-structuralist thought never could. So this is my approach: to think with Stirner, to critique with Lacan, and to resist with Deleuze and Guattari. Post-anarchism isn't a fixed ideology or a final destination. It's a continuous process of liberation. And Stirner's egoism is the security system that keeps it stable, that keeps it on the ground, that keeps it grounded. The ego is ungraspable, the spooks are many, and liberation is always unfinished. So let's keep the critique alive.